Phantom Nightmare releases on February 9th. Following up on Age of Overlord, this set expands the potential of some of the new engines that are already dominating the game. Things are heating up in the metagame, and it's only getting hotter. Here's... Hi, I'm Mickey Mouse from the 1920 animated short Steamboat Willie. You may be wondering why my voice is so deep, but that's because Mickey Mouse actually didn't speak until 1929. He did, however, contrary to popular belief, have red overalls and yellow shoes and promotional materials from the time, but that's neither here nor there. The reason I'm here today is to let you know that I, Mickey Mouse from the 1920 animated short Steamboat Willie, am a longtime fan of the Curry Bandits, and have been subscribed to them ever since, every Sprite Combo 3. If you want to be like me, Mickey Mouse, from the 1920 animated short Steamboat Willie, you too should subscribe to the Curry Bandits and maybe their Patreon too. Also, I did 9/11. I'm Mickey Mouse from the 1920 animated short Steamboat Willie. Snake Eye Poplar is a level 1 pyro that summons itself when it's added to hand, searches a Snake Eye spell trap on summon, and when it's sent to the graveyard you can target a fire in the graveyard and place it in the back row. Dramatic Snake Eye Chase places a Diabellstar monster from hand, deck, or graveyard, and during the end phase can banish itself from graveyard to summon a monster from your back row. Briefly going over Chase, it's not really that great right now. On its own, it represents an activation of Diabellstar in the end phase, which is no good for original Sinful Spoils line, but can get you Arciella or Silvera if that's your jam. In tandem with other Snake Eye cards, you can do a bit more. The Diabellstar in your back row can be used as a free send for the effects of Snake Eye monsters to summon from deck, and once it's in the graveyard, you can reborn it with something like Selene. Also, if you use Flamberge's effect-efficient IP that you linked off during your combo out of the bin and put it in your back row, Chase can push it onto the field in the end phase, meaning you're not forced to end on Flamberge just to get it on board. And thankfully, it is now searchable because they gave Snake Eye a spell trap searcher. Poplar resolves that glaring hole in design space that made a bunch of their cards practically unplayable, and they're just using as more copies of Diabellstar. By using the newly released Bonfire as a means of searching it, decks that benefit from the original Sinful Spoils can use Poplar as yet another searcher for it with a unique upside. Since it can place itself in the back row after being linked off, you can search Snake Eye, make link Haribo, then place Poplar to use as the cost for Snake Eye. This leaves you with one extra body on board that you otherwise wouldn't have had in a Diabellstar line, notably an excellent potential material for SP. The downside is of course that this line is more vulnerable to droll and a little less repeatable. Draw phase wanted is one of the most common lines you'll hear in an event these days for a reason. The quick play speed of Diabellstar Searcher is an important part of what keeps the combo safe, as is Diabellstar placing from deck rather than adding. Both Bonfire and Poplar give your opponent an opportunity to droll you, so for common Snake Eye targets who are known for searching, Diabellstar is still mostly preferable. Also, Bonfire only searching the deck, unlike Wanted being able to scoop out of grave, means that once you use your one copy of Poplar, the other copies of Bonfire in your deck are dead unless you're on other pyros. Original Sinful Spoils can shuffle that one copy back, but that's attached to a level 1 fire search, which maybe you can't even do if you've already run through your 1 or 2 copies of their archetypal level 1 that most Diabellstar decks are on these days. Regardless of these hangups, Poplar has seen huge amounts of play in decks like Rescue Ace and Fire Kings, giving them more consistency and link potential. Fire King specifically has morphed a lot more towards being a Snake Eye-centric combo deck that plays Ash, Flamberge, and sometimes Oak to make a big link board that's robust to hand traps and board breakers. Low, Prayers of the Voiceless Voice, places a Voiceless Voice continuous spell trap from deck on summon, can be used as the full tribute for the ritual summon of a light warrior or dragon, and if such a monster is summoned while it's in the graveyard, it reborns itself. Saphira, Dragon Queen of the Voiceless Voice, can pitch itself from hand to mill a ritual spell, then search a light warrior or dragon ritual, and can banish itself from graveyard to ritual summon a light warrior or dragon. Soravis, Dragon Sage of the Voiceless Voice, can summon itself by shuffling back 2 spells, including a ritual spell, and when your opponent activates a card or effect, he bounces back to hand to summon a light warrior or dragon ritual from deck, but bounce it to hand during the next end phase. Skull Guardian, Protector of the Voiceless Voice, gains 20/50 while Low is on the field or graveyard, searches a Voiceless Voice monster or a warrior or dragon ritual when it's ritual summoned, and can negate and destroy a card or effect while you control Low. Prayers is a ritual spell for any light monster, and if your opponent removes your light ritual monster, you can banish it from graveyard to summon a Soravis, the old one, Saphira, the old one, or Skull Guardian, the new one, from hand or deck. Barrier makes your light monsters untargetable while you control Novox in a light ritual, and searches a Voiceless Voice card or Skull Guardian ritual monster once per turn. And Radiance can either shuffle a light warrior or dragon ritual into the deck to either search or summon a Voiceless Voice monster, or pop itself and cards your opponent controls up to the number of light warrior or dragon rituals you control. This deck has actually seen a lot of success in the OCG as a slower, more control-oriented strategy that nonetheless can set up some pretty intimidating boards. Skull Guardian's Omni-Negate can be pretty threatening, especially on a 4100 body with protection from targeting, and even if you get it off field, Prayer in the graveyard can just replace him with another Skull Guardian or a Cyberse if you already burned through the hard ones per turn. I often rag on summon negates as not that impactful, but as part of a balanced breakfast, Cyberse's summon negation can provide plenty of pressure. Even without barrier live, Cyberse in hand can keep your board safe from things like Imperm, which are largely the only ways your opponent has to stop Lowe's plays from deck. The same is true of Skull Guardian's Search, since you can usually chain block it from Ash by using Lowe's effect to reborn itself as Chain Link 2. Any way to Lowe is full combo, since it can place barrier on summon to search Saphira, who sets up the ritual summon of Skull Guardian. If you went through Prosper pre-prep, which you can play since Prayer mentions all three of your rituals by name, you'll have enough spells engraved to summon Sagely Cyberse, whose effect can tag into his ritual counterpart, or into one of the other rituals that fit the deck's criteria, like Odd-Eye's Pendulum Graft Dragon, a Spell Negate, or Kukulane, who does not do anything productive whatsoever, but I can pronounce Kukulane. What can you do, you fucking loser? Fuck you, Dad. And since Lowe triggers on any special summon of such a ritual monster, linking her and Skull Guardian off for Dynamondo, then immediately firing off in your opponent's draw phase to bring back Skull Guardian, will trigger Lowe to come back and place Radiance from deck, adding a pop to your board. Being a ritual deck, you can of course play Diviner of the Heralds, but rather than just sending Arclight, you can send Trias Hierarchia so you contribute the Diviner and trigger its effect to summon Lowe from deck for another 1-card starter. This deck's success is actually really inspiring. They made a competitive ritual deck without some stupid floodgate or infinite negate boards that play around 100 trillion hand traps. Instead, it's just a consistent, grindy control strat with pieces that are extremely difficult to remove and can recur every turn. I complain a lot, so I gotta remember to leave positive feedback on this show sometimes. Maybe you guys can leave some positive feedback every now and then so I don't tweet shit about wanting to burn my house down with me in it every few months. Spirit of Yubel summons itself from hand when your opponent attacks, can't be destroyed by battle and takes no damage. On summon, either searches or sets a spell trap that mentions Yubel, and when it's destroyed, floats into the original Yubel. Samsara de Lotus contribute itself to summon a Yubel monster from deck, comes back to hand or field during the end phase if you control Yubel, and when your opponent activates a monster effect, contribute itself to replace that effect with destroying your Yubel. Geist Grinder Golem can reveal a Yubel to summon itself to your opponent's field and summon the revealed monster to your field. And if it battles a Yubel, gives the opposing player 3000 life. Also, if you summon Yubel while it's in the graveyard, you can give it to your opponent again. Nightmare Pain can pop a Dark from hand or field to search Yubel or a card that mentions it, and forces your opponent to attack your Yubels and deflects all damage you would have taken back at them. Mature Chronicle gets a counter each time you summon Yubel or a card that mentions it, and can remove 1 counter to reborn Yubel, 2 to add back a banished card, 3 to banish any card from deck, 4 to pop a card, or 5 to search Super Polymerization. An Eternal Favorite can either summon a dead or banished Yubel. Hey, quick warning, the dumbest guy at your locals is going to tell you that this effect is Calamity or something. It just means your opponent can't, like, trap hole the Yubel or some shit. Look up Star Reader. Or if you control the OG Yubel, can pitch a card and itself to fusion summon using materials from either side of the field, including Yubel. Finally, Yubel the Loving Defender Forever is a fusion of a Yubel monster and any number of effect monsters that pings for 5 on summon for each material, is indestructible, and after battling an opponent's monster, burns them equal to its attack and banishes it. So let me get this straight. This deck got the craziest Super Poly target ever, an in-archetype Super Poly, a Searcher for Super Poly, a Searcher for both those cards, a Lone Fire for the Searcher, a Searcher for the Lone Fire. This is just the best deck. Oh my god. See this? You can make any deck look good just by saying all the things that it does. Truth is, the deck's fun, but has to make some clear concessions to make up for the very outdated design of the original Yubel. Lotus on its own gets you to Yubel with Nightmare and Favorite on board, and can come back during the end phase so you can use its pseudo-negate as well, but you won't have anything to tribute for Yubel's maintenance cost except the Lotus, so you have to choose between either sacking the Lotus and having the board wipe fusion as your entire board, or letting Yubel die and reviving it with Favorite's other effect and having Samsara's negate as your entire end board. Drawing legitimately any monster that summons itself resolves the issue, as it can serve as the tribute in Samsara's stead, but there doesn't seem to be any candidate for the job you're really meant to play without pivoting the deck in a very specific direction, like Unchained. There is a true 1-card combo with Tour Guide. I lied, it's 1.5, but basically you start with Tour Guide and Rhino, make Muckraker, Rhino mill Samsara, and Muckraker pitch a card to revive the Samsara, so you can do the full line, then tribute Muckraker for Yubel. So there's maybe something there, but regardless, it's a little disjointed and doesn't really have everything it needs to succeed. Still, it's not really a bad attempt to modernize Yubel. If you care, Eternal Favorite is searchable with Infernal Rage. If that comes up, I'll literally take a shit.
I'm going green goblin mode. Fuck these hoes. I'm going green goblin. I'm the real stepper, real Margiela that relaxes your money. Going green goblin mode. I'm going green goblin mode. Going green goblin mode. I'm going green goblin mode.
Goblin Biker Doug Charger can summon itself from hand by detaching material from any monster on field, and when it's summoned, searches a Goblin Biker spell or trap. Clattersploder can summon itself from graveyard during your opponent's main phase by detaching a material from anywhere on field, and on summon, reborns a goblin monster. Yeah, that's right, we got 2 different layers to this archetype, do your best to keep track. Mean Merciless summons itself from the graveyard during your main phase by detaching material and summons a goblin from hand on summon, and finally, Boom Mock can summon itself from hand or graveyard during either main phase by detaching a material, no once per turn to attempt it, only once per turn if you succeed. Goblin Biker Grand Entrance searches a goblin, then can detach a material from a monster to summon a goblin from hand. Also, you can banish it from graveyard and detach a material to add back a goblin to hand. Grand Bash gives every goblin 300 for each goblin you control, gives you an extra normal of a goblin, and can take 2 goblins you control and either match their levels or combine them. Grand Stampede can Xyz summon any monster using only goblins, and if you control a goblin Xyz, can detach a material to negate a monster on the field. Big Gabonga searches a goblin monster on summon, attaches a goblin to itself from deck in the end phase, and if materials detached from a monster, can target a face-up monster to attach to itself. And Goblin's Crazy Beast can detach 2 materials to suck up a spell trap, protect a monster from being destroyed by card effect by detaching material, and once per duel can come back from the graveyard and attach a goblin from graveyard. This deck has some neat potential as a rank 3 toolbox deck that can make generic rank 3 disruptions like Cicada and Ashura King. It also interacts very well with the Armor Xyz engine because you can play through drawing full Armored Xyz by using your Goblin Biker effects to detach the remaining materials from Fortress. The quick effect detaches on Mock and Clatter make Gabonga an interruption as well, and since Clatter can summon Merciless, who can then summon Doug from hand, you can consistently summon enough goblins on your opponent's turn to enable a quick Xyz of Ashura King with full armored or Stampede. And just by resolving any way to make Gabonga, you can search Doug, who gets you to a rival, which searches Clatter, and then you can attach Merciless during the end phase, snowballing you into almost the full suite of goblins just with any rank 3 play. The catch is that the deck kinda lacks its own way to make a rank 3. All their effects to summon themselves are tied to there already being an Xyz on field. Merciless can make a rank 3 if you draw another goblin, but to enable that, you need to be on a critical mass of goblins, even though only one of them is theoretically any good to draw. There's plenty of generic rank 3 enablers you benefit from, so you can still build the deck to consistently get to Gabonga, but it feels like a pretty weird oversight to make an entire archetype worth of cards that are totally dependent on you already playing. Makes the goblins into the worst cards to draw in the goblin deck. It does, however, give you a chance to get pretty creative, as do many facets of this deck. Bash seems to be incentivizing you to try playing Goblinburg and experiment with rank 4s, 6s, and 7s. Not a single card in the deck locks you in any way, so you can try plenty of other rank 3s, even ones that pivot you into a completely different archetype like Chariot Carry, and you can play Link monsters like the one Link monster. I'm excited to see what people come up with this strat and what future support it gets. Hopefully it's not some shitty turtle that doesn't do anything, that'd suck. Last thing to bring up is that these cards have seen some success generically as a side deck engine meant to counter decks like Purely, since they affect the material, not the monster, similar to Xyz Encore, and Noir needs to have a level 1 Purely attached to use its effect to spin, starting your turn by using Doug to swipe the level 1 off, searching a rival to summon Boom and then rip another material, then linking Doug and Boom for something like SP so you can use Boom's effect engraved to grab a third material, can make even the most jacked up Noir into a sniveling vanilla. Even against decks that have the capacity to negate and even destroy Boon, since its effect isn't once per turn, you can keep attempting it from the hand or graveyard as many times as it takes, only losing the ability to once it succeeds. Vados, the Eruption Dragon of Extinction, is a level 9 Dark Pyro that can quick effect pop a card in the field zone to summon itself to the opponent's field and either search or set an Ashen Continuous Trap. And if it goes from the opponent's field to the graveyard, you can destroy all monsters on the field. Obsidian, the Ashen City, makes the opposing special summon monsters Pyros during your turn, bottoms an Obsidian from graveyard during the end phase to draw a card, and if it's destroyed or banished, summons an Ashen from deck. All the monsters Clinton summon themselves while you control Obsidian. Priestess of the Ashen City searches an Ashen card on summon. King summons an Ashen from hand or deck if your opponent controls a monster with 2800 or more. And Hero can quick effect pop a Pyro on the field, and if it was Vados, can place an Obsidian from deck. Awakening of Vados is a quick play that places Obsidian on either field, then if your opponent controls a field spell, searches a level 5 or higher Dark Pyro, and before you even ask, I have literally already read you every single target in this paragraph alone. And Ashen for Eternity can grab a Vados or Ashen out of the graveyard on activation, and can steal back a monster your opponent controls that you own, and cut the attack of all monsters they control by that monster's attack. Okay, 20-minute lunch break to figure out how to break these things. Let's fucking go. So the Stratos is searchable by Bonfire. Please buy Maze of Millennia. I guess this is a good start, but there's some pretty weird issues that I don't know what to make of. The only interruption this deck really has access to is Hero popping Vados to wipe the board, making him, what, a worse Garunix Eternity? Kinda odd. In this specific format, where Pyros are around, I guess, Hero can pop more than just Vados depending on the matchup, but that's not really something to hang your hat on. If your opponent needs their field spell for something, Vados can disrupt that by popping it before it can even resolve. Stuff like Raitsoth that searches on activation is effectively negated by this, so if for some reason you need more Ash Blossoms in a metagame where every deck has a Union Hanger, that's a new possible generic hand trap. In most matchups though, you'll just be using it to kill your own Obsidian, which will float into any of your other monsters, which is a much cheaper way to find your Stratos. That kind of leads into another of the issues, being that Priestess doesn't actually have a good thing to search unless you control Obsidian. All the other monsters need to summon themselves, neither Vados nor Awakening or Ashen cards, so you can't search them, and the trap is your search target for Vados himself, and brief tangent, Vados' effect to summon himself can be ashed. And very deliberately, because there's actually pretty much no scenario where you want to search Eternity instead of setting it, so the only reason it can do either or instead of just setting it is an act of vandalism, making the deck's whole axis upon which it operates ashable just cuz. Just fucking strange. This deck would probably go crazy for pre-errata Ancient Fairy Dragon. Pop Obsidian and then add another one to resolve countless issues with the deck, I imagine. I don't know though. I feel like I'm talking myself out of this deck. The more I think about it and think through how it's meant to operate, the less I feel like this is as strong of a start as I thought. Hopefully the next wave has ways to search Vados cards so that your 6 copies of Make the Deck Function juice are more consistently available without having to pivot through Banshee. And hopefully there will be more cards that can serve as a real goal for the deck's turn 1 beyond Darkhold Pass. Also, Joseph, hey, eyes up here. The trap isn't Snatch Steal, it's Owner's Seal. Magis Spectre Porcupine Yamarashi is a wind spellcaster with the standard Magis Spectre protections that can quick effect summon itself if you control a Magis Spectre, and resets a Magis Spectre spell from the bin on summon. Wind can optionally tribute a wind spellcaster as cost, then summon a Magis Spectre from hand or graveyard if you didn't, or from deck if you did. Magis Spectre Draco Ryu is a generic rank 4 pendulum that can twice per turn detach a material when a monster is tributed to summon a level 6 or lower wind spellcaster from deck. When it dies, it goes to the scale where it can search a Magis Spectre card, then pop a card in the pen zone. Magis Spectre Orthrus Nue is a link 2 that requires 2 pens, including a Magis Spectre, that on summon can add back up to 2 Magis Spectres from extra deck to hand, then place up to 2 Magis Spectres from deck in the extra, but locks you to Magis Spectre and Draco Slayer monsters for the turn. These cards hugely speed up the Magis Spectre archetype, giving them some actual consistent turn 1 lines with 1-card starters for multiple interruptions and follow-up. Bunbuku can search Porcupine, who can summon itself to make Nue, whose effect will add back both its materials to set scales with, and load up the extra with 2 Magis Spectres that will grab one of the deck's disruptive back row to end on. Or you can set up Honorary Magis Spectre Majesty Pegasus, who can search Secret Village or Majesty's Pegasus to trigger Ryu turn 1, getting you 2 more Magis Spectre summons for the price of 1. Searching the field spell also lets her act as a starter in jankier hands where you draw one of the worst Magis Spectres like QB and Ogama, since she can pop the other one from the scale to search Dynamite Powerload, who you can then scale to pull her out of the back row to trigger her effect, so that the field spell can summon Bunbuku from deck. Less convolutedly, Yada being able to search Wind lets you do full combo as well by using Wind to trade Yada for Bunbuku. At which point Yamarashi will have a target engraved for its reset effect, giving you another piece of follow-up. And Ryu is fantastic as a piece of the end board for its ability to reimburse you for the tribute cost of all your back row, letting you summon things like Bunbuku and Nikotama during your opponent's turn to not only maintain the same amount of board presence, but also get you some searches to use for turn 3. And unlike most of the shit we reviewed on that other show I do largely for shits and giggles,
Assault Mode activate tributes, oh my god! Cooking king crab on the stove with the formula!
her non-archetype restricted summon has a couple kind of interesting targets provided you're not locked under Nue. Gen X Blast Fan can grab Birdman from deck for an easy to summon tuner. Blue Dragon Summoner is a critical piece of the Exodia FTK that may be in the market for new lines following the death of Isolde. Elfuria is a floodgate against Xyz decks. Ice Spell is a fucking time card, god. If you want, you can even exploit the twice per turn restriction by summoning Blast Fan on the first activation to get Birdman, then summoning Droll on the second activation to bounce to hand with Birdman. Foolishness, but hey, we gotta keep the rent prices in Yu-Gi Boomers' heads as low as possible, so sometimes you just gotta shoot a floodgate-shaped gun out the window and fire at the sky. It probably goes without saying, but all this would be much better if we had Kieran. Not you. Not you. Are there any more Kierans I need to know about? No. Kieran. Magis Spectre Unicorn Kieran would be huge for the strength of the turn 1 end board and the deck's ability to play through Droll. As is, if you get Drolled on Bunbuku, you can still set one trap with Ogama and make Ryu to get a refund on the cost of that trap, but if you could summon Kieran during your opponent's turn, that'd add one more pressing threat to your board through an interruption that you're otherwise vulnerable to. We all kinda assumed they'd bring him back in the OCG to sell the new support, and everyone agreed it'd be no big deal, but no. Still dead in Japan. Still dead in the States too, so we know it's not an Electromite thing. I don't know what they're waiting for. He's literally in the art of half the new cards. Guess we'll circle back to that next month? Please? Aroma Lilith Rosalina can quick effect pitch itself to gain life equal to half the attack of an Aroma you control, and on summon she summons a non-tuner Aroma from deck, but locks you to plants for the turn. Aroma Blend pitches a card to place Humid, Dried, or Blessed Winds from deck, and can banish itself from graveyard to fusion summon a plant fusion monster. Miraculously, if your life points are higher. Healing gives you 1000 life for each Aroma card you control, and can banish itself from grave to reborn Aroma and gain 500. Magnolia is a fusion of an Aroma and any plant that protects your plants from card effects while your life is higher.
You can pay 2K to
Banish cards on the field equal to the number of winds you control, and if you gain life, can give all plants that much attack. An Aroma Lilith Rosemary searches an Aroma card on summon, summons Aromas from hand to its zones when you gain life, and contribute a monster it points to banish a card on the field and gain 1000 life. These cards have some cool potential in Plant Link. Rosalina can be another 1-card starter by summoning Laurel from deck, whose effect to gain life when it's linked off for Jasmine will trigger her effect to search, getting you an extender that Jasmine can tag into Lonefire, who can then tribute Jasmine to summon Lokai, clearing the EMZ for Dryas in the process. This line is neat, but isn't really optimal, although the deck has already started playing Laurel as part of an adaptation to cope with the limit of Dryas and Healer. Getting locked to plant and forced to burn Jasmine's hard once per turn effect that early can be pretty detrimental. For example, the extender you search with Jasmine is usually going to be Lily Borea, who can still use her effect to search Disc Coliseum, but you won't be able to summon Regulus, so he'll just have to chill in your hand for follow-up, I guess. Furthermore, most of the lines constructed around these cards were made immediately after they were revealed before the most recent ban list, and since the only person in the community who really tries to keep up with every new card between their OCG and TCG releases, well, me, there isn't really a well-theoried out version of this 1-card combo that takes these limits into account. Aroma Blend is cool in that it follows in the footsteps of Ground Xeno by being a fusion spell in the graveyard as an extra bonus on top of an already good effect on field, but they forgot to make the effect on field good. The wins aren't terrible. Human is a searcher and a heal, Blessed is a heal or a reborn, and Dryad is a pop and a torrential at the cost of giving up your life surplus. These can all add to your potential end board options, especially if you play Sweet Marjoram, but if Plant wanted more bricky continuous traps to put on their end board, they wouldn't have cut Bloom. And the fusion just doesn't do very much aside from the protection. Even the banish is a little fucky in some respects. If you have all 3 wins up, you have to banish exactly 3, even if your opponent only has 1 or 2 things on board, so if you accidentally get all 3 of them up, you have to banish some of your own shit. So even an extra pure Aroma, it's at least not ideal. For what it's worth, Aroma Blend can summon any plant fusion, so let's say you take a detour through a Predaplant engine in your combo, now you have access to shit like Chimera Phlesia and Dragostapelia. At least I'm trying. So that just leaves Rosemary, who is actually pretty good. The soul charge from hand is a little wonky. Summoning from hand has kind of been power crept on a conceptual level at this point, but I'm sure it's crazy and pure. As a piece in Plant Link, you could search Blend if you choose to go in that direction, or Angelica, who can pitch herself to gain life, triggering your Jasmines on board, and then summon herself out of the graveyard for extension. The banish is alright for breaking a board too. Also, I cannot figure out what healing is supposed to accomplish. There's like 20 Aroma cards that do everything it does better. Like, how much more basic does it get than gain life points, summon an Aroma monster? I think probably every Aroma card does that. Raidraptor Norlanius can target a Raidraptor you control and search a Raidraptor with a different level, and can banish itself from graveyard to modulate all your Raptors up or down a level. Bloom Vulture can summon itself and a second Raidraptor from hand if your board is clear aside from birds, and if your board is completely empty, can summon itself and another level 4 or lower Raidraptor from graveyard. Brave Strix is a rank 5 that can detach a material to set a Raidraptor spell or trap from deck, or if it has a Winged Beast as material, can detach a material to search a rank up magic. Roost is a continuous spell that searches a Raidraptor back row when your Raidraptor is summoned from the extra deck, and can bottom 3 Raptors from grave or banished to draw a card. Glorious Bright is a normal trap that negates a monster if you control a Raidraptor, or any face-up card if you control a Raidraptor Xyz, and banishes itself to add back a Raidraptor from grave or banished. Rise Rank Up Magic Raidraptor's Force is a quick play you can activate in either main phase or your opponent's battle phase to target 2 or more Raidraptor Xyz monsters from your field or graveyard, including 1 on field, and summon an Xyz monster with a rank equal to their combined ranks and attach all the target's material. The year is 2024. You can now synchro summon Xyz monsters. And finally, don't know what you heard, but Raidraptor Rising Rebellion Falcon is a rank 13 and thus quantifiably the biggest bird. Say the line Bart, unaffected by card effects, wipes your opponent's board on summon, and burns them if it has 3 or more Raidraptor Xyz monsters attached, and it can detach 3 materials to copy the effects of a Raidraptor Xyz in the trash. These cards streamline Raidraptor's existing support into some tight one-card lines for boards with a mix of big unaffected guys and a few impactful disruptions. Brave Strix can be summoned by the effects of Raider's Knight, so he's basically just a rank 4, and with his ability to search Skip Force, you can turn him into Liverpool Falcon to grab any level 4 winged beast from deck. Noir is a good searcher, giving more purpose to your off-level birds like Heel Eagle, who can't as easily be a 4 Strix material, but can be half of Y Strix, no problem. Bloom is a crazy good extender that gets multiple bodies on board without even needing your normal summon to stick. Roost is extremely strong as a way to recycle copies of 4 Strix, which you often run through quickly in a turn 1 combo. Spending your Miscellaneous search on it isn't even that much of a commitment, since its first effect can search whatever Raidraptor spell trap you would have otherwise searched, and Glorious Bright is a great choice for that, a quick spot negate to fend off any big threats to your World Trade Center. And Rise Rank Up makes it easier than ever to summon your extravagantly high-ranked Towers birds by adding up the ranks you've gone through to make things like Ultimate Falcon on your own turn, and Rebellion Falcon on your opponent's turn to wipe the field while they're... Hey, wait a minute.
I can explain.
With Heel Eagle being able to add Rise Rank Up back to hand after being used on your own turn, you can do both as part of one setup. And rank 13 is a weirdly very good rank for this exact purpose, since the 3 Xyz monsters you'll be going through most frequently are 4 Strix, Raider's Knight, and Brave Strix, who, well, would you look at that, that's 13. Card design. If this segment feels weirdly structured, it's because I don't know what the words I'm saying mean. Raidraptors are my kryptonite. I do not understand them. I cannot wrap my head around, honestly, even what people enjoy about them. I just ask Dymax what they do and then James Somerton my way into failing the Turing test. If I keep making references, people will think my writing is good. Horus, the Black Flame deity, can reveal itself from hand and pitch a card while you control a Horus monster, and Sark to send a card from the field to the graveyard. And if your opponent removes your Sark or one of your Horus monsters, can summon itself from hand and send all other monsters on the field to the graveyard. Walls of the Imperial Tombs is a field spell that's treated as Sark on board, can search a Horus monster, then bottom a card from hand, and after activating Black Flame deity, you can draw a card. Imperial Tombs greatly improves the consistency of the Horus engine, giving you 3 more ways to find Imseti, although it does come at the cost of a card and in a manner that's harder to offset than if you just had to pitch it. It does also give you another card on board named King Sark, so your Horuses can continue to come back every turn even if their enabler gets taken out. Black Flame Deity is a little less useful, being a bit restrictive in how its removal effect can even be used, but it does punish your opponent for trying to remove Sark pretty hard. The really annoying thing about it is that it only procs from hand, so it doesn't do anything if you mill it with Sark. Kinda disjointed design there, a whole deck focused on milling all its names gets a boss that only does things from hand. Cool support, but nothing revolutionary. Here, let's try to knock out all the fish support at once. Let's go. Chief Keef, Merc of the Goatee, can summon itself if you control a fish, summons itself during the next standby phase after being banished. When your opponent's special summons, can banish itself and their monster, and summon one of your banished fish. Wanda Sykes, Moonlight of the Goatee, searches any fish monster on summon. There's 92 of them. I'm not reading every single one of them, you annoying. Then banishes a fish from hand or field. And if it's banished, can banish your fish from hand, field, or graveyard to summon itself. White Sardine can send a White Sardine from deck as cost to summon itself, but locks you to waters from the extra deck. And if it's summoned from the graveyard, can treat itself as a tuner. White Sunfish can target a level 4 or lower fish in graveyard with the same name as one you control to summon itself and the target, and if it's summoned from the graveyard, can become a tuner. White Reincarnation is a continuous spell that searches a fish that can treat itself as a tuner on activation. The cracks are fucking showing. Can give a white aura monster an extra attack, and if a level 8 or higher fish synchro is summoned from the graveyard, can destroy all your opponent's monsters. White Aura Porpoise summons a level 4 or lower fish from hand or graveyard on summon, then can summon another monster with the same name from the graveyard, and if it's destroyed, can banish a water from graveyard to reborn itself and become a tuner. Finally, Fish Lamp summons 2 lamp tokens when it's used as synchro material but locks you to fish, and can banish itself from graveyard while you control a fish synchro to pop a card on the field. These cards are cool new pieces for Goatee, with Keef being a neat little extender, a strong interruption that also gets one of your pieces back to the board to be used as material, and one of your fish that will migrate back to the field at the start of your opponent's turn, meaning you can freely banish it to pay for your effects. Sykes is extraordinarily potent, being able to reel in not just your Goatees from deck, but also any fish extenders you want, like Silent Angler or Abyss Shark. It even bridges the gap between Goatee and Coelacanth, but Coelacanth's level and the ginormous target on his head for interruption might make him a poor investment. Having to banish one of your fish can be an issue, but since he returns to the board immediately after being banished, you can offer him up for the resolution of his own effect, then get him right back at the cost of a fish from the bin. His revival effect also makes him the perfect target for Arion Post to banish from deck, and what great timing, because the white folk have given Goatee an excellent new means of making Arion Post. By using Sardine to mill a copy of himself and summon, you have the ability to resolve Sunfish, summoning himself and the Sardine from grave, which can become a tuner opening up a level 6 or 8 synchro play. If Orianpos is in the move there, Porpoise can be used as a sort of fish-specific Ash Dragon, getting you back Sunfish, who can also become a tuner to make a 10 like Cheng-Ying or Gamir. The odd man out is Fish Lamp, who can put a lot of bodies on board and serve as a cool removal tool, but might be tricky to work with on account of being fire instead of water, and therefore unsummonable under the restrictions of Abyss Shark and White Sardine. Yo, bro, why are you doing that? Centur-ion ain't top yet, bruh. Don't worry. Enigmaster Pack Bit drops February 9th. Listen. I was never dick smart at penis shot. I actually didn't write the song. I forgot. I was a busy day at work. Enigmaster Packbit is a level 8 Cyberse synchro that on summon or on being sent to the graveyard can discard a card to put a monster from your graveyard or your opponent's field in the back row as a trap. And while it's treated as a trap, can quickly summon a monster out of your back row. This card's got a couple neat applications in decks like Centur-ion, since it specifically turns the monsters from your trash into traps instead of spells. You can use them in scenarios where your play gets stopped in a way that leaves you on 2 level 4s on board to place Primera in the back row to summon during your opponent's turn, like a level 8 version of Legadia. On the opponent's turn, you can use Stand Up to turn Primera and Packbit into Legadia, triggering both Legadia's effect to pop and draw, and Packbit's effect to push one of your opponent's monsters to the back. In the Horus variant, where you're likely to play rank 8s like Photon Lord, you can use him as Xyz material so that when he's detached, you get that push removal as well. Changing topics, he also provides a great option to send with Terahertz. Normally, Aggregator is the only worthwhile option for Terahertz to send on your opponent's turn for a disruption, but he's like really bad at that, because trigger effects that negate a monster need to be very precisely timed and not be too late to do anything, especially when taking player priority into account. A triggered removal effect is much more flexible as disruption. There is, however, the issue of the discard cost, which, yeah, that's annoying. I like all these cards in my hand. They're my friends. At least it's for effect, not for cost, so if your opponent negates it, you won't be down a card. EMP Meow Mine is the level 2 Cyberse monster that summons itself.
Wow.
If there's a Link monster, pretty much anywhere. And if your Link 2 monster goes to the graveyard or is banished, you can banish him from hand or graveyard to bounce an opponent's monster. This card is a great new extender for Cyberse decks, being about as generic as it gets for the ability to summon itself, especially when playing into a board. And its effect in the graveyard gives you a great way to board break, a good deterrent against your opponent out of your board, and a potential disruption that will trigger when using the effects of IP or SP. This interaction also makes it a great option for Sprite, which can set him up with Sprint or Gigantic, and has seen success in Salamangreat, which has become less Firelock dependent after the release of... well, we'll talk about that. Memento Clan summons itself if it's sent to the graveyard by Memento Monster's effect, and fishes a Memento card out of the bin on summon. This card adds some options to Memento's plays, giving them something to mill Tatsuno Toshigo and Goblin that will immediately translate to cards on board and in hand, but that doesn't really cleanly slide into existing Memento lines in ways that really change the math. The 1-card combos are still Snatch, Steal, Pass. The 2-card combos maybe have better odds at ending on IP or SP in addition to your trap. I wasn't even going to bring this card up at all until I heard about the Legacy of Destruction support. Unlike Reinforce, this card actually will matter to the functionality of the deck once it becomes, playable, so I thought I'd bring it up now so there isn't just like a phantom Memento you've never heard of before in the next video like Graggle Simpson. Okay, quick paragraph about Swallow's Cowrie because I think the card's really good, but I have 15 minutes before my deadline. It tributes a Wing Beast from hand or field to search any Wing Beast with the same level. That's really good in Blackwing, Fluandries, maybe Raidraptor. Can dodge Imperm on your activations, but unlike Nest, it doesn't need your normal summon, so it's really good as a starter. Maybe try something with Gujaku Jaku. I don't know. Oh, well, also it's a quick play, so it can play around Droll, and it kind of gives you the ability to pivot off of lines that lose to Droll when your opponent reveals they have it by essentially going, never mind, I'm searching something else as Chainlink 2. Emissary from the House of Wax is an illusion with the illusion gimmick that summons itself when your opponent attacks, and at the end of your opponent's battle phase, warning points your opponent's whole board until their next battle phase. Battle Fader is a dying art. A role in society that has gone the way of the dodo bird and the fax machine. But every now and then, it becomes clear that they refuse to die. Emissary is a crazy punisher for going to battle phase without a negate on board or a way to destroy a monster. Since illusions, mostly, are safe from battle, your opponent will be forced to go to main phase 2, at which point everything they built up in main phase 1 will be pinned in place, unable to even help them rebuild. Obviously not that great generically, but in Chimera, you can use your Gazelle search on Emissary to use as a deterrent against your opponent trying to out your board with the battle phase. As with all battle tricks, it's less of an active threat when your opponent knows it's there, but like Relinquished Anima, even if it never resolves, that means it's doing its job. Master of Ham is a fusion monster whose materials are 1 copy of instant fusion that summons any flip monster from hand or deck face down on being summoned or flipped, and can banish 2 flip monsters from grave or face up field to reborn itself face down. I don't actually know of anything particularly worth saying about this card, but I was informed that if I failed to mention him, the trans community would finally cancel me once and for all. I'm already on thin ice after the grave mistake of being right about Earthbound prisoners. Anyway, the flip link agenda continues. By Angel of Mischief, Orphis Scorpio is a 1-card guard dog lock. Iron Thunder is a counter trap that pays half your life to negate a spell, trap, or monster effect on the field, then destroys all cards in the same column as the activated card. While it's an extremely strong card with access to some of the best parts of both Judgment and Strike, it has its pitfalls. If you want to use it in a way that a deck like Spiral, for example, would have used Judgment to stop Dark Ruler, your opponent can play around that by activating Dark Rule in the same column as one of your threats. If they go Dark Rule in the same column as your Baron, Iron Thunder might not be as profitable a trade as you might have hoped. I think this is going to be some day 1 cope you should know how to easily exploit.
Vsauce lore update.
Come on! The Black Goat Laughs can declare a monster card name to make both players unable to special summon that monster for the turn, except from the graveyard, and can banish itself from the graveyard and declare a monster name to make both players unable to activate that monster's effects for the turn. You know what? Fuck it. I'll be the one to say it. What an annoying piece of shit. I mean, seriously, fuck targeted floodgates for different matchups. Now you just pick what you're floodgating every time, like the final form of Dimensional Barrier. No chance of getting screwed over by backer removal like Prohibition, just 2 turns of telling your opponent's key card to shut the fuck up for a minute. The first effect is best used on an extra deck card since there's no way to summon them from the graveyard without first summoning them from the extra deck. Something like Hugin comes to mind, although the best that does is chain to a runic spell and force them to activate a second one. A lot of the best decks right now aren't as dependent on extra deck cards though, so against decks like Rescue Ace and Fire King, the most you're doing is heavily restricting the lines through which they get to Turbulence or Garunics. Notably, this set does make it absurdly easy to summon fire monsters from the graveyard, but
Are we there yet?
We get there when we get there!
it's the second effect that you really want, the guarantee that whatever you call is going to be quiet for a turn. That's where Labyrinth comes in, because we're never going to talk about a trap card ever again without mentioning the word furniture. Obviously, Black Goat is a great option to grab from deck with Lady, but as early as turn 0, you can furniture pitch Black Goat to inform your opponent that, contrary to popular belief, they've actually lost the die roll. By the time it hits the graveyard, it's too late for even DD Crow to save you. They can chain to a shifter and draw phase, so that's not good enough. Seems like the only way to counter that would be either Skullmeister or Engraver of the Mark. Ugh. Now imagine combining this with Transaction Rollback, who can copy Black Goat's first effect to restrict the summon of 2 different mission-critical monsters in your opponent's deck, or let you apply both its Summon Floodgate and Effect Floodgate in the same turn. Frustrating. This is mostly seen play in Labyrinth, where of course they have many axes on which to interact with it, but I don't really doubt that it could see side deck play in a world where the format is too wide for any one particular floodgate to cut it. Promethean Princess, Bestower of Flames is a generic Link 3 Fire Fiend that locks you to only special summoning fires while she's on the field, can reborn a fire once per turn, and when a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field, can target a fire you control and a monster your opponent controls, pop both, then summon herself from the graveyard. This card does a little bit of everything. With both a powerful extension effect and a great interruption, she serves multiple purposes in fire-focused decks, which are already taking up a huge chunk of the metagame. In Fire King, she's become a vital piece of the end board, letting you turn a Link 3 into a Link 4 with ease, although the options of Fire Link 4s are a tiny bit limited, leading to the rehabilitation of Amblawale's image. Amblawale seems very well suited to being the exact off-ramp for Princess, with an effect that will trigger upon being destroyed by Princess to reborn a Link 2 like Sunlight Wolf or Hida, and when you pop Princess on board with Kieran, Amblawale will trigger in the graveyard, banishing itself to pop yet another opponent's card. Meanwhile, if you sequence a little differently and use Kieran to pop Amblawale, its effect can reborn links of another attribute, meaning if you go through IP or SP while climbing to Princess, you can reborn them. Also, if you reborn Sunlight Wolf into the zone under the EMZ, you can later use Sanctuary to summon Eternity to that EMZ, letting you chain block the board wipe with Sunlight Wolf's effect, reducing your opponent's options of playing around your board. Speaking of Sunlight Wolf, there's nothing stopping you from using Princess to make him, especially if your other material is Flamberge, who will trigger to summon 2 level 1 fires, triggering Sunlight Wolf to add something back, and putting material on board for an Apollo while still getting Princess in the graveyard to use her effect at some point. Jumping over to Rescue Ace, Princess some fucking how made Turbulence harder to negate. Because Turbulence is an ignition effect, pairing it with SP doesn't fully insulate it from Impermanent Valor, since they can be used on summon. But if they do that, you haven't yet attempted the effect. So if you link off SP and Turbulence into Princess, you can reborn the Turbulence to try it again, meaning that your opponent needs 2 Imperms or Valors to stop it. After that, you can make Princess and Turbulence into Sunlight Wolf, who can recur stuff like your now limited Airlifter, and serve as the target for your cool new interruption that doesn't lose to evenly matched. Both these decks can also take advantage of the interactions between Princess, Raging Phoenix, and Zelantis. As a fire Fire Link 4, Raging Phoenix is among the exclusive club of actually a Link 3 with Princess, so while your opponent controls a monster and you have an extra fire on board, you can turn Princess into Raging, then terrestrialize Raging into Zealantis, who can blink the whole field, summoning a monster to your opponent's board, which triggers Princess. Princess will pop both their monster and your extra fire, which will trigger Raging Phoenix in the grave, summoning itself and gaining the destroy monster's attack, which could be fucking 0 for all I care, since 28 plus 27 plus 25 would you take a fucking look at that. Card design. I don't have time to explain why we call this the Transfo OTK, because now we have to talk about Salamangreat. Not only is Raging Phoenix a Link 3 now, it's a generic Link 3 now, meaning you can go through some of Cyberse's other tools like Cyberse Wicked, which has started seeing play as a way to search Weasel. This pivot away from the fire restriction of cards like Of makes it easier to use extra material for generic stuff like SP. And with Weasel's effect, you can even use Princess to play around Nibiru. Since Weasel can summon itself regardless of what's on board as long as your trash is Salaman good enough, you can summon next to your Nibiru token, then link it off to trigger its effect to summon a Salad to your opponent's field, which triggers Princess. From there, it kind of depends where they nib, but to sum it up, you can Balinks protect your monster to retain as material for Raging, or if you have Raging in graveyard already, it'll trigger upon your guy getting destroyed so it can come back and reincarnate. Or if you've already used Sanctuary this turn, you can link it off with the Princess to reincarnate it. The year is 2024, Salad doesn't lose to nib! Other than that, the card's kind of whatever. It's been out in Master Duel for a while now as part of some sort of community outreach program like the Peace Corps or that time Michelle Obama tried to get kids to play outside. All it really seems like she's doing there is looping pendulum cards and being generally forgettable. I think the lesson we're meant to take here is that she's not objectively that good of a card. No pros are peeling oranges for her the way they are for SP. Instead, she's just part of the culmination of months of fire support that have spawned these really impressive fire combo decks that she fits right into. So I guess that begs the question, are they gonna call it here? Is the year of fire over? Or is more and more stuff just gonna get piled on top until it's impossible to say who the problem card even is anymore? It's Snake Guy.